The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the Fandotech Friday 15 Mission Technical Reconnaissance. If you have any questions during the presentation, type them into your question window. This week, our presenter Joe Bucheri is explaining and demonstrating email encryption. Take it away, Joe.
Thank you, Craig. Email encryption. This is certainly has been a hot topic over the last few years due to compliance issues. So and many other reasons. So let's get right into it. So, why do you need email encryption, and who needs email encryption? Well, certainly one of the biggest things out there that people have to understand is email, when it leaves the internet, is over a protocol called SMTP, and SMTP is not encrypted. So therefore, whatever you have in the body of your email is sent out in a fashion that if someone were listening to internet protocols and capturing that, they can read the information that's in that email message. There's nothing really difficult about doing that. So the encryption, therefore, becomes a big issue when you're dealing with compliance. So there's a number of different legislations that have come out. HIPAA is certainly one of them, Sarbanes-Oxley, but HIPAA is one of the primary ones. In addition, locally here, certainly in the state of Massachusetts, there's also those legislations, and the purpose for that is to make people's information, their private information, secure. And so the way you do that is you encrypt the message. And encryption of email is not something that's necessarily built into the standard email servers that are out there. And so there's a way that you have to do it. But let me get back to the whys, which is compliance, obviously privacy, confidentiality, and certainly overall security concerns, especially as it relates to business practices. And you're not wanting your competitors, understanding all of your private communication. And then even then, there's just overall best practices. You want to be able to tell someone something private. Well, the best way to do that is to encrypt it. So those are the real whys. As it relates to the who's, certainly compliance has driven the specifics of who's. And Massachusetts, Nevada, and California are examples of 3 states that have enacted legislation that demand that encryption happen for specific message types. And it's also certainly because of healthcare and certainly all of the privacy related to healthcare. Healthcare is a huge area where encryption is mandatory. And certainly beyond that, whether you're getting into legal law communications, laboratories, finance, insurance, credit cards, all of those things are great reasons of why you and who should be using encryption, whether it's something that's mandated through the government or whether it's just something that should be done as a best practice. So those are really the high levels of who and why we need email encryption. Let's just talk a little bit about what are some of the other benefits to email encryption. Certainly there's by encrypting email, certainly from a business perspective, knowing that you can put encryption in place, you know that you can have confidential information that's not going to be stolen by anyone. You might be dealing with proprietary information or even just overall, business advantage of someone else knowing someone else's information. So, and even if you have this, instance where, it was sent to an unintended recipient, can they open it? And certainly encryption can get into helping you with that problem. So information control is definitely a critical element of email or side benefit of encryption. And then certainly we already talked about the compliance side. It's mandated. It's a law that you have to do this for certain specific business types. As we talked about, it's mandatory in the state of Massachusetts. But the other side of that is it's not necessarily mandatory. It's mandatory when you have things like personal information. You have credit card information, personal account numbers. Anytime you're sending information that has a person's private things, that's when it has to be enacted. So this really gets to the next phase beyond compliance, and that's automation. How do you verify and make sure that your email is being encrypted at the right time? Does that mean that you'll automatically want to send every body of email in an encrypted fashion? Well, you don't want that to happen, because encryption does add a layer of complexity on top of sending and receiving email. And certainly there's plenty of times when we're sending and receiving email where we don't want it encrypted because it's just general communication that does not get into anyone's personal private information. So that's really where automation comes into play, where you can set policies. You can set a policy that says, hey, anytime there is a credit card number in an email, it's automatically going to encrypt the message. Anytime there is a Social Security number that's in the body of the email, or whatever automation needs to be defined by that business. Maybe they have, for example, a bank. Anytime they have a bank account number, and that bank has an account number that is specific. Maybe it's 15 characters, or it's 3 characters followed by a dash followed by 10 characters. Those are the things that can define how the automation works. And so as long as you can define it, you can then automate it. Beyond that, certainly there's reporting. When has, was a message encrypted? And if it was encrypted, who read it and who opened it? So that's really where you get into the reporting side of it, knowing what the audit trail was. And by having encryption, you're adding that additional audit trail on there. And certainly one of the things that's, email is obviously very ubiquitous, and people, use it for everything, but it does not have the thorough audit trail. Yes, you sent a message, but you don't always know that all of the different hops that it hit along the way, and do you really know whether the person opened it? Not all the times. It depends upon email systems and whether they talk to each other in an appropriate manner, whether they're all following the same conventions, and that's not always the case. But with email encryption, it adds a level of auditing on top of it so that you can guarantee that whether it was delivered, whether it was received, and whether it was read. And then beyond that, as we stated, it's a good business practice, and so it assures customer confidentiality. So it becomes a positive business case for doing it, and hence the word sensible. So how does it work? Well, so as it relates to automation, so you can always encrypt messages by a specific flag, and we'll talk about that a little bit, and that you can use by a keyword. So for example, you can use a keyword in the subject line of your email, and if you put in the word secure or the word confidential or whatever keyword you want to define, that will flag to the system that, okay, this message needs to be encrypted. So that's certainly one way of doing it. That does involve the sender knowingly putting that in there. There are ways of doing it so that it does not automatically, so the sender can do it in the background. In other words, it happens automatically, and that's by putting other content. So for example, as we talked about, maybe the system is going to scan that email, and it's going to look for certain key things. For example, it may look for a credit card number. It may look for a Social Security number. Credit card numbers and Social Security numbers have a finite defined number of characters, and they have a specific syntax in which they're formatted. So the email system is going to look for those classic definitions, and wherever it finds it in the body of an email message, it will automatically encrypt that message. You can add in other things like patient data, specific business codes, if you have license numbers. So there are things beyond that that you can add. So that's the whole idea about automation, is that you create a policy, and the policy then runs automatically. And as stated, it does that by scanning the content of the email. Once it actually scans that and decides that it's going to encrypt it, it does send a notification back to the recipient saying that, yes, we have this message that is being encrypted. You then, when it goes to the following side, when the following email system receives it, you get a notification back that the other email system received it, and then when the user actually reads it, you'll get a notification on that. So hence, you get notifications that it got to its intended destination, and then you also get you get the notification when the sender has actually read it. You can also enable secure recipient pickup so that you really know that the intended person is the person who's getting that email message. So that's really all defined in how it works. All of this runs on top of the standard mail protocols. So that's the how. And then beyond that, you can do detailed reporting. As we talked about previously on the previous slide, you can get reports of how well it's worked. One other thing to note is there are multiple systems out there for encrypting email. And each system is a little bit different. There are some systems that work very well with one another. There are other systems where they don't work so well with one another, but there's always a fallback, and I'll describe what the fallback is. So let's just talk a little bit about the experience. So this is where we get into it. The experience can be very different based upon the systems that are used. I'm going to give you a demonstration here in a second, and we happen to use a product from a company called Zix. Now, Zix has a network, and so their recipient experience might be a little bit different than some others. But with Zix as an example, if I'm sending a secure message to another user who is also within the Zix network, that message, I go into my regular email control screen. For me here in a minute, I'm going to go into Outlook, but it doesn't matter. I could be in the web version. I could be, whatever my local email client is. It doesn't really matter. But when I go to send that message, and I'm sending it to another user who's also in the Zix environment, they're going to get that message just like they get any other message. And in many ways, they don't even know that that message was encrypted, because the message got sent out, it got encrypted, it got sent to the far side. The far side knows who the recipient is, therefore it knows how to de-encrypt it. I'm sorry, it knows who the sender was, and it knows who the recipient is, and therefore it knows how to de-encrypt that message and deliver it through the normal mail system to that end user. So that's from like company A to company B, both being on the Zix network. But if you weren't both on the Zix network, how will a user be sent a message? Well, the way it works is when the message goes out, the sender, it's the same process. It's regular email from company A. But when it gets into the Zix network, they know that that user is not part of the Zix network, or the end using system does not follow a convention for encrypted email. So therefore, if there isn't a de-encryptor on the far side, what it does is it automatically sends that message to a secure website. and it sends the user a regular email message saying, hey, you have received a secure message, and here's the link to a portal that you could go log into to read your secure message. So it works with the email delivery is still the same, you just don't read the actual message. You get a link to the message, and the message, that link will send you to a portal where you can log in. So the portal side of it is where we talk about this first-time activation. If you are just receiving a message from that person for the first time, then you have to subscribe to that portal, which just means that you have to put in a username and a password that defines that you are the individual that that has the ability and authority to open messages intended for that email destination. And again, the user is directed to that through the registration link that is sent on the email that they receive. Once that's the first time. Once they're in there, then any subsequent mail messages will be sent there. They'll automatically be able to log in and open the message. And that's really where it gets to the pickup center. Once they get to the pickup center, it's very similar to any other webmail type of interface, whether it be Google, Yahoo, Outlook Web Access, that sort of thing. And I'll show you here in a second what that looks like. Once you're in there in that pickup center, you read the message in a normal, like you're doing through any browser. You can see any attachments that are on there, and you'll read the content. So that really, at a high level, is what the process is all about. Let me add one little tidbit into this as it relates to policies. One of the things that we've found that has sometimes come up as questions to our end users is, well, I had a PDF attachment that I attached to an email, and I sent it out, and it didn't get encrypted, and they want to know why that didn't happen. Well, first of all, they didn't flag it as being secured in the subject line, and in the body of the email, there was nothing that defined or hit the policy. So in other words, in the body of the email, it didn't have a social security number, it didn't have a credit card number, it didn't have whatever the policy constraints are. Well, then the question back from the end user was, well, in the PDF attachment to that email, it had a credit card number. I thought it was supposed to read the credit card numbers. And here's the problem with that. The PDF attachment, as far as email is concerned, is a blob. It's an image. And the scanning engine cannot scan the contents of a picture, which is effectively what that PDF is. It would have to be OCR'd and converted to characters before the email engine would be able to compare it against the policy. So that is one of those things that you have to define, where you'd have to train your users that if anytime they're going to attach a PDF, they have to make sure that that message is secure, or they have to somehow automatically put in there that they're sending in account information, or that that PDF contains some private information. So that's one of the little minor holes with secure email that you need to know about. So at any rate, let's get into our demonstration, and let me jump around here, minimize this. So I have my Outlook email, and I'm just going to use as an example, if I go in and create a message, I'm going to send this to my home email account. And so within here, I can do this a couple of different ways. Again, if I want to manually flag this as being a secure message, all I do is put in the word secure, and then I type in the message. Or, in the body of this message, it does not have to just be in the subject line. I could have the, as we stated, social security number. I could have a credit card number. Any of those things in the body of the message would automatically make this secure. In this case, the rule that we created says, hey, in the subject line, if the word secure exists, and it can exist anywhere in the line, so we could have more stuff after this or before it, I would still pick it up, then it will encrypt this message. So this is an encrypted message. And then obviously we send it through our normal means, and it goes out. So now I'm going to jump over here And so this is my webmail account for my home email, and there's the message. You'll actually see this. I sent this a minute ago just because I didn't want to have to deal with delays. So here's the body of the email that I've received. And again, this example that we're using here is Zix, but this is true of a number of different platforms. And so it says, hey, you've received this message. In order to view this message, I have to click open. And what that does is it brings me to a portal. So if I click that, you'll see here it jumps me over to an external link, which happens to be our external link site. So this just happens to be ours, but this is true of whoever is sending the message. So you can create a portal that is specific to your environment. And in this case, I have to remember what my password is. Hopefully I remember. Ah, there we go. Okay, so it wasn't the first password, it was the second password. But in their case, so there it is. Now I've received the message, and now I'm actually reading the message, which states, in this case, all I did was just said this is a test. But now that I'm in here, now I could reply. I could reply back to that end user, and as long as I'm within this browser screen, I don't have to jump back out to my regular email system. But in this particular case, it is fully secure, and I will also be able to see any attachments. So that's it.
Well, thank you, Joe, and thank you to all of today's participants. If we didn't answer all of your questions, we'll circle back with you independently. This webinar will be available for viewing on our blog at blog.fandotech.com, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Fandotech, and on SlideShare at slideshare.net/Fandotech. Join us next week for another Fandotech Friday 15 Tech Recon, where we'll be hosting an IT discussion panel. Register today by visiting blog.fandotech.com and clicking on the Friday 15 logo. This has been a presentation of Fandotech.